All right, Raider Nation, welcome back. It's another episode of the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. Alongside Bucky Brooks, I'm Rhett Lewis. Excited to be back here with you with so much data to take into consideration from all the numbers, the testing, and everything we saw over a week's worth of work at the Combine in Indianapolis, where we brought you our last episode. If you haven't caught that one, be sure to check that out over on the Raiders app or wherever you get your podcast, Raiders.com, also available for you. We're looking forward to having a chat with Raiders GM John Spytek coming up here real soon. But Bucky, until then, feel like it's always a good moment here in these days following the Combine to kind of put all this into perspective, because you look at it, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. Measurements, numbers, 40 times, the whole thing. From your experience as a scout and spending time in the league, what are teams doing now that we have all that information from the Combine?
So right now they're still organizing everything because there's so much data that you have to kind of digest.
Yeah.
You have people in the building that are kind of putting all of the measurements with the tags and the cards as they're beginning to stack the board. And then you have all the higher ups beginning to make discussions and decisions on, okay, which pro days do we need to get to follow up on either what we saw at the Combine or what we haven't seen. And we need to get the information so we can really complete all the scouting reports on all the prospects that are on the board. The next month, the month of March, is really about that. It's about putting the finishing touches on all of the reports by gathering all of the information from pro days in terms of the measurements, the athletic testing numbers, and those things, but also having the coaches go out and to begin to work out these players individually to see if they are good schematic fits for how the team wants to play going forward. So March is a lot of everyone working kind of remotely and independently, so we can come back in April and really put up and have all the information that we need to make the right decisions over draft weekend.
Yeah. And then, I feel like leading into the Combine, we kind of talked about the idea of, all right, you kind of want to get a feel for all these prospects, right? You want to have seen, where you want to obviously have seen some of the tape. You want to have, at least a broad understanding of who they are, what they can do, where they might fit. And maybe you're kind of clustering everybody together a little bit in some of those position groups that you like. But now, how do you kind of view coming out of the Combine what some of that data means and how it kind of translates to, as you mentioned, the board and setting things up here for each team?
Okay, so going all the way back to when I first got into the league, first as a player, but then eventually scouting for people that were, I would say, descendants of the Ron Wolf tree. Ron Wolf, Hall of Fame executive who learned at the knee of Al Davis, the late Al Davis.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of the things that I've been taught have been by way of Ron Wolf that really came through Al Davis. And so during this time, the Combine, the pro days are never really supposed to hurt you. They're only supposed to help you. And they're these testing numbers that we gather are not supposed to, I would say, overshadow what a player did on tape. The tape should always be the basis of the grade. The Combine and pro day workout should be kind of like a side dish to their overall meal. What we're doing now is if something popped at the Combine where someone is notably faster, notably more athletic than we kind of anticipated, now we go and cross-reference the tape. Did we see these athletic traits jump off the tape? If we didn't, why didn't we see those things? Then it requires more investigation, going to the pro day, having them work out again, having them do some football type things to see if that was manufactured athleticism, meaning he's trained with someone for 6 to 8 weeks. He's become a much better athlete during that time, but can he get it to translate to the games? You should always go back to the tape because the tape is really the player's DNA.
That's right.
Don't dismiss what you saw on tape in lieu of what someone did in an athletic workout.
Yeah, and I think, there were so many top prospects at each position group that decided not to take part in the Combine testing and on-field drills. You talk about the quarterbacks, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, among those that did not participate. Obviously, they were there. They went through interviews. They did some of the measurements as well. And then you look at, wide receivers, Tetaroa McMillan, as the kind of one of the guys we've been considering at the top of the class didn't go. A lot of the D tackles at the top of the class didn't go. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, kind of go down the list. Abdul Carter unable to go because of injury from the edge group. Same with Jalen Walker from Georgia, Michael Williams from Georgia. So that, like, again, I don't think that hurts them, right? That they chose not to participate for whatever reason it was, whether it was injury or otherwise. But what it does do, the combine in particular, is provide an opportunity for those guys that are participating to maybe stand out, right? To stand out in a group of players that they may be clustered in with, right? We talk about a lot, like you want to get the players in the right neighborhood, and then you want to eventually find the right house, right? And so some of these clusters, as you kind of compare things, and when you get extra data points like this from the combine, that feels really valuable to kind of help cluster bust, if you will, on some of those position groups and some of those players that you might have similar grades on.
Absolutely. That is what it's supposed to do. It is supposed to be a tool that allows you to separate the guys that are similarly graded.
Right.
Normally, when you have guys that carry similar grades off tape, you always opt for the bigger, faster, more athletic version. Like that's typically how it goes because you're banking on this player improving because they have better athletic traits and tools to get better. It's not 100%, but that's typically how you opt and decide it in meeting rooms. That is why for a lot of guys who elected to work out when some of their contemporaries didn't, it is something that can help them vault up a few players, which could be significant when we think about it. So go from being maybe the 7th rated corner to the 4th rated corner because those guys were similarly graded, but now you're a better athlete. That could be the difference between being the bottom of a first round player versus being the middle of a second round player. We always talk about the numbers and the money when it, you kind of approximate value based on draft position, it can be significant. So yeah, the combine is a huge event when it comes to separating those clusters. And it's one where, look, scouts pay very, very close attention to the guys that are top performers.
Yeah, indeed. And if we're looking at, targeted positions for the Raiders, obviously, quarterback continues, to be one of those positions right at the very top of the priority list that we're talking when you're trying to find yourself a franchise quarterback. Sounded like there were reports today that the Raiders are going to move on from Gardner Minshew. So they lose some experience there. A guy who started a number of games in the league, Aiden O'Connell still on the roster, but who is going to be the guy? And will that guy come from the draft? I think that's obviously one of the ways in which you go about solving this position. But this is kind of a unique year, especially when you compare it to last year for the quarterbacks, as we've been talking. Good news for everybody who was a little bummed out in Raider Nation that they didn't get a chance to see Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders throw it around in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. Bucky and myself and our buddy Daniel Jeremiah for NFL Network will be on the call for Cam Ward's Pro Day, March 24th down in Miami. So we will get to see him throw it around there. We will get to see Shedeur Sanders Pro Day as well on April 4th. So all that's coming up for you on NFL Network a little bit later on down this month and into April as we kind of roll down this path to the draft. But in that light, it felt like, again, like we were talking about, with those two guys not throwing, it provided an opportunity for some other guys to kind of grab some spotlight, grab a little shine, grab a headline or two here and there. And as you look at it, Bucky, who were maybe some of the guys who might be trying to move up in a cluster or separate themselves from others after what we saw in Indianapolis?
It's funny because going into the combine, the presumed QB3 was going to be Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. There was a lot of positive conversation and buzz around him, given the success that he had at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin, given the fact that he had a chance to show his wares at the Senior Bowl and those things. But coming out of the combine, all of the conversation, all the attention was on Tyler Shough from Louisville. Big-time thrower, big-time playmaker, 7th-year collegiate player, but someone who had tools that just jumped when you were in attendance. We were in the building. We got a chance to see it. It just felt different when you watched him throw, when you saw him run around, when you see the physical traits that he had compared to some of the others that are vying for attention at the position. He certainly stood out. That has made it very interesting when you start talking to people about him and some of the others, because the gamble that you have outside of the top two, you're trying to figure out, would I rather have the guy that has the prototypical traits that tend to play well in this league, or do I want someone who has tremendous production but maybe a little undersized or maybe lacking when it comes to the arm talent? it is a debate that
Yeah.
everyone has, but the Louisville standout certainly put himself in an intriguing conversation when it comes to where he should come off the board.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I thought, he had an opportunity and made the most of it in Indianapolis. And to me, kind of stole the show on that day. And not just with the throwing, but guy ran 4.64 in the 40. Actually ran 4.67 on the first run, came back and beat it at 4.64, called himself White Lightning to Stacey Dales, our colleague at NFL Network, right after he ran the 4.64, knew he beat the time. He riled up the crowd, like kind of played into it, a little bit of showmanship right there. And, I appreciated seeing that from a guy, in a position where you expect an alpha, right? You expect a dude who's going to be a magnet. And the rest of his, the guys that were in the groups were excited for him too, which I love seeing at the combine. So, with Tyler, obviously the conversation is the experience, advanced experience. Look, advanced age when it comes to coming into the league. 25 years old, has a bunch of degrees, has been at 3 different schools and played for 7 years. Well, you look into the why, right? Well, he was Justin Herbert's backup at Oregon. Okay, understand that, right? And like that also gives you a sense of like where he's been and how long he's been in college football. But when he moves on from Oregon to find a better opportunity at Texas Tech, it's not like he had poor production or he had poor performance. He had a couple of freak injuries. Now, you can say what you want about freak injuries and what they mean to you in terms of how you value a player's durability, but he had a collarbone that he broke his first year at Texas Tech. And they decided not to have surgery so he could come back and try to play with it. And he came back and then broke the same collarbone again.
Common.
Got the surgery and has been totally fine with it. Has not bothered him, has not affected him since then. You go back to the ankle injury. Broke his ankle at Texas Tech.
Right.
Well, it was a hip drop tackle that got him. Right. And they ran him probably a little bit more than you might expect at Texas Tech. And so I think that he was in some vulnerable positions. But again, like that stuff happens. You can't control the way that a guy's going to tackle you. You can talk about getting down and getting out of bounds, getting yourself out of harm's way. But look, it didn't happen on that play. And, the ankle went. And so he lost the season there. Or a big portion of a season there. So he finished, wasn't able to finish 3 complete seasons at Texas Tech. But once the ankle healed, was good to go, went to Louisville, where he had the privilege, or he had the opportunity to learn under Jeff and Brian Brom, who do run, an offense that has some pro style, concepts to it. A lot was on his plate, played a completely healthy season, and was one of the more productive quarterbacks in college football. Earned an invite to the Senior Bowl, where he impressed us again there in Mobile. Came out in the combine. And I'm just like, this calendar year for Tyler Shough is one that, the arrow's going this way, right? It's trending in the right direction. So now I'm really curious as to how teams view him. Like, we were probably talking about what, a 4th round type of guy, maybe early day 3, maybe late day 2, like have things progressed now to the point where like, all right, we looked at the tape, or, we saw him at the combine. Now we go back and look at the tape. Do some things kind of resonate with us watching that Louisville season where he was healthy and played really well? And could we find, himself ascending in terms of where he ends up getting drafted?
Yeah, look, I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. A lot of the love that Tyler Shough will receive down the line will come from coaches that have an opportunity to not only watch him in private workouts, but get a chance to interview him and assess where he is in his quarterback development. I would say, being a guy who has been around college football for 7 years, he certainly has enough reps to be able to understand the game at a very, very high level. So those conversations should be high-level discussions when it comes to how he diagnoses, how he reads, how he processes, and those things. The other thing, I would have to check the number of games that he started, but for some of these teams who may be looking for a quarterback but have pieces in place, maybe he is a potential plug-and-play option given his age and experience. It's not the same conversation as Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels, but it could be a similar conversation to the one that you had about Michael Penix, because Michael Penix had injuries and those things, and there was a lot of conversation about Michael Penix's age when he was entering the draft last season. Michael Penix made an immediate push for Kirk Cousins' job when he stepped into Atlanta, maybe Tyler Shough, and I'm not saying they're the same, but I'm saying when you look at their careers and their odysseys and those things, maybe Tyler Shough in the right environment has an opportunity to come and play his way into a starting job early in his career as a day two prospect right now as it currently sits in the landscape.
Yeah, I think that's something to watch. I don't think Jackson Dart did anything to dissuade us from considering him as the third quarterback off the board or in that conversation. I think there was some talk about Shedeur Sanders certainly throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens every year, Bucky. We get reports from folks about the interviews, right? And while there are reports out there that Shedeur was maybe not the most engaged with some teams, felt disinterested in some meetings. It can continue, depending on what reports you read. How do you parse through all that for a prospect, like Shedeur, that has been a polarizing guy throughout his entire collegiate career?
Yeah, no, it's just such an interesting conversation because he is very polarizing. He's been polarizing his entire career because of who he is and how he conducts his business, but also who his dad is. And so that is always going to factor into the equation. But sometimes these things remind me of the NBA draft and how NBA reports happen and how prospects in the NBA can be kind of dismissive later rounds because they've been given an assurance that, hey, man, no matter what,
they're going here.
You're not going below this pick. And that can change the way that you handle some of these conversations. What we don't know is at the top of the board, there are three teams that we know need quarterbacks like within the top five: Tennessee, Cleveland, New York. One of those teams expressed to Shedeur that no matter what happens,
we got
you're not getting past us. That changes the way that I may interact with the Jets at 7. I may interact with some of the teams in the middle of the first round if I feel strong enough about those conversations. We'll see, but it does make for interesting conversation and fodder because in a league that is governed by quarterback play, he is one of the top 2 quarterbacks. One of the top 3. Just to say loosely, he's one of the top 3. Okay, where does that third quarterback go? At the floor. It's probably going to be a first round pick somewhere. So that's the conversation that we're having right now.
Because historically, that's what it tells us. That's what draft results tell us is that outside of the Kenny Pickett year where we only had one quarterback, you maybe go back to the EJ Manuel year as well, where I think he was the only quarterback taken in the first round. That was Gino was the next one, right in the second round.
Yeah,
those are outliers. Right. And so we feel pretty confident in the fact that we're going to get to probably 3 at some point, depending on where it all ends up and who that guy is. Again, only takes one. We had this conversation with Kyler Murray. Yes. Remember, there was the report that came out that Kyler Murray, was disinterested in a lot of the interviews. Well, probably because the Cardinals told him they were going to take him at 1. You didn't have to worry about it. He's like, what are we doing here, guys? This is all mathematic at this point, right? So anyway, those are just some of the things to think about there with the quarterbacks. How about we highlight just a couple of other performers that might be moving up in a given cluster, right? Might have done well for themselves because of what they put out there on tape at the combine. Again, look, if you're talking about the D linemen, again, a lot of the top guys weren't out there. I thought Shamar Stewart took this opportunity to steal the show with his athletic prowess there, again, with some of the top guys not participating. The fact that dude runs 4.5 with, 267 pounds and jumps 40 inches. And now you got to weigh the production, right? Because everything compares extremely close to Myles Garrett, right? In terms of measurables and frame, the thing that doesn't is the production. Myles had over 30 sacks. Shamar Stewart has 4.5.
Yeah, that's the thing. The production part of it is the only thing that will keep him out of it. But we've seen guys who have not had production, but have been able to go high just because people are willing to bank on the truth. Rashawn Gary is a guy that comes to mind when I think about it. He did not have great production at Michigan, despite being a freak athlete. That was one of the top recruits in the country when he came out. Stewart is really intriguing because you just don't see guys that can move around and run like that. Like his athleticism, his explosiveness that he displayed via jumps, the way that he moved on the field. Like this is a unique player. And then when you go and you look at the tape, He doesn't have sack production, but he does have consistent pressures when you look at the pressure rates. Some teams value consistent pressure, the pressure rates more than they value sack production. He is going to be a guy. We talk about top 15. Maybe he cracks the top 10 because there's always a team that has a coaching staff that is willing to say, give me the athleticism, give me the tools and traits, and we can figure out a way to make him productive. He helped himself maybe more than any other prospect in the draft based on how he worked out at the combine.
No question. Let me ask you this question about the Raiders in particular with draft needs. And if we're talking about, a Pete Carroll coach football team, philosophy wise, like what they're going to value and, what he valued in the past. And obviously running game has been a big deal for Pete Carroll coach teams, in the NFL, going back to the success with the Seahawks. Running back feels like a place that could certainly be addressed with the draft. Is 6 too high? And if that's the case, Ashton Jeanty, Amarian Hampton, but then you look beyond that because I feel like Travion Henderson and maybe Quinshon Judkins in particular also might have helped themselves enough to be like, okay, yeah, of course we love Jeanty, but maybe we can take another blue chip player at 6 and come back around and find ourselves an opportunity with a guy like Quinshon Judkins who ran sub 4.5, ran a 4.40, and is a really physical prospect. And maybe that gives us a better way to improve multiple facets of the team.
Yeah, when I look at Pete Carroll, I'm a big believer that success leaves clues. And when you go back and look at when Pete Carroll has been his most successful, he has always had elite runners in the backfield. Let's go back to his time at USC and who he had, Reggie Bush and Lindell White. When we think about the great times in Seattle, it was Marshawn Lynch being a bell cow.
Yes.
He also attempted to sustain that success by drafting Rashad Penny in the first round. He is unafraid of taking a running back in the first round because he understands the impact. And let's go all the way back to those Seattle teams and how at a time when teams were operating with a 60-40 pass-run ratio, the Seattle Seahawks were the outlier with a 55-45 run-pass ratio. He wants to run the football, and particularly when you have uncertainty at quarterback, it makes sense. It also makes sense to run the ball because running the ball shortens the games. It helps your defense. It adds physicality to your offense. Ashton Jeanty is special. If he's there at 6, to me, it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders to make that move, especially if they add a veteran quarterback or if they're unsure that the quarterbacks that are sitting there staring them in the face are really, really franchise guys. Take the franchise running back because we know a franchise running back certainly can spark an offense in this day and age.
Scheme diverse, has everything you want. Didn't work out at the combine. We'll probably see him at his pro day at Boise, but Ashton Jeanty's everything you want in a running back, in my opinion, at this point. Any other guys, any other position groups before we get out of here that that we should highlight that makes sense as potential Raiders?
I think the Raiders have to look at cornerback. They have to look at the cornerback situation and scenario and figure out can they get young, athletic players that can take their defense up to another level. Knowing Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, the versatility that he wants to throw at the multiple looks he wants to throw at opponents, man, I think there's some versatile guys. For so long, we talked about Will Johnson being the next one to come off the board after Travis Hunter, but then Jadae Barron works out and blows it up. Now maybe the Raiders change their sights. Instead of a first-round corner, maybe it's a second-round corner with an opportunity to get someone at the bottom of the first round. And look, man, there's so many names that perform really well that could be in that conversation. It'd be an interesting discussion for John Spartak and Pete Carroll and the coaches and scouts to kind of sort it out.
And again, big men up front, right? You can never go wrong. Continuing to reinforce the offensive line. And with the performances we saw from Will Campbell and Armand Membu from Missouri, those guys go 1-2 and might be available one of the two there at 6 to continue just to try. Look, it's one thing to feel comfortable. It's one thing to also find, improvement, right? To try to get better at a position, even if you feel comfortable at it, right? And that's not a place to turn away from, certainly considering the success of the Philadelphia Eagles on both sides of the ball, as we've talked about oftentimes. Okay, just a quick little combine primer there for you. We'll get into the pro days coming up here, but we're going to keep the combine conversation going here because I had a chance to chat with the founder and CEO of D1 Sports Training, Will Bartholomew, former fullback at the University of Tennessee, founded D1, trains prospects for the combine, for the draft, and we'll get a better sense of what the value in these numbers really is, what they mean, how they project to NFL success. And so we'll get that conversation for you with Will Bartholomew right now. Will, thanks for doing this, man. Excited to talk to you a little bit about these numbers. And, when you think back, though, on your combine experience and how it's now changed to what we're watching on national television, for 4 straight days with all these workouts, man, it's kind of nuts thinking about it, isn't it?
It's nuts. I love the production value, man.
Oh.
It is so good.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was no one in there. Nobody showed anything.
Sterile environment.
Yeah.
You're a pin drop.
I mean, it was so quiet.
Yeah.
If one guy grunted, everybody's like, oh, what's going on in here? Now it's like, fanfare. People are cheering and the players getting everybody hype. It's awesome.
It's cool. It's it was like one of my favorite moments. One of our mutual friends, David Morris, at QB Country trains Tyler Shough, one of his satellite offices. Landry Klon actually does it, but Tyler ran a 40-yard. He was only quarterback in his group to run the 40. Ran 4.67 on the first attempt, and I'm like, all right, he's shutting it down. That's a good time for a nearly 6'5" quarterback, right? Then he goes out and runs it again, beats it by 0.3, and runs 4.64, and gets like the crowd fired.
The crowd hype. It was awesome.
Right?
I saw that. That was great.
Super cool, man. And so like there's moments now that we didn't get years ago that we get now, which are cool. But obviously the teams, like the Raiders, you have to sort through all that and kind of get down to the business of what matters. Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into that for these prospects. So if you could give us kind of an idea of what a week, might look like as guys are spending 6 to 8 weeks with you at D1 training and trying to get themselves in the best possible position to impress at the combine.
Yeah, absolutely. To give you context, we've been doing this for 20 plus years. When I first started, I had no idea that I would have, guys. I called it D1 because I wanted to replicate the D1 experience. And then I had these athletes go, hey, you put up some big numbers at the combine, and I'm going to come train with you. So had, 15 guys in my first draft class. And it was one of those times that, man, it means so much because it's a completely different training experience than training for football.
Yeah.
When you're training for a football season, you're consuming a lot of calories. You're trying to recover. You're getting ready for Saturday. Your body's getting banged up. You're trying to make sure your body is tough enough to take the hits and endure and get up and, compete. This is more like a track meet.
Yeah. You
are training for an event, 1 or 2 40s, an L drill, a broad jump, vertical jump, a shuttle. And so for a track athlete, it's just different in the sense of you're really honing in on the moment. And we get, as a training center, we get anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, depending on all-star breaks and when a guy gets done with the playoffs, to get these guys in top shape. Not only get them in top shape, but then also teach them the finer mechanics of the drills, how many steps they're going to run in a 40-yard dash, what is the steps they're going to have in an L drill shuttle, how to explode in a vertical, a broad jump. And so we get 6 to 8 weeks to do that. And what that looks like is in a given week, they're going to train 6 days a week. You're going to train 2 to 3 times a day. You're going to do linear speed twice a week, agility speed twice a week. You're going to do competitions because we got to keep that competitive spirit going. You're going to be in the weight room, and then you're going to do position drills. And we're going to rep these drills that they do over and over and over again, where you're almost like memorizing it. So that way, when you get to the day to perform, it's no longer like you're trying to figure out the drill. It's, I know exactly what the drill is. Now I just got to go perform.
And by the way, Will mentioned, just kind of off the cuff that he had some pretty good combine numbers. I went and found him, Will, and so I can second the fact that you, sitting here at 246 pounds, ran 4.69 in the 40 as a fullback, 35 reps on the bench. Let's go.
Hey, first of all, it was 39. They didn't. It was 39. Somehow the NFL guys got it wrong and put 35. I'm still holding it against them. No, just
for sure I would. That's incredible. And then vertical 38 inches. Which, look, if we had a separate class for fullbacks, that would lead the way this year. 11'2" in the broad, 4.09 in the 20-yard shuttle. So hat tip, my friend.
Thanks.
You were rolling on that. So look, my point is, you know what you're talking about here, obviously. And so when we look at, some of these numbers, 40, 20-yard shuttle, vert, broad jump, and then the 3-cone or the L drill, how do you kind of look at these results, and what would teams, do you think, find valuable as they're projecting these guys with the results? Do you feel like it varies by position?
It definitely varies by position. It also varies on what you're looking for, by position, and then it's contextual, like in the sense of hey, do we have a fast 40, a low vertical? Do we have a great 10-yard split, and I'm an offensive lineman, which is what you want. You want somebody to fire off the ball.
Same for an edge rusher, right? I mean,
same for an edge rusher. Yeah. And so I think it's when you start looking at it, you kind of layer in all the different tests to go, okay, what kind of athlete am I getting? And then obviously you got the freaks, right? You got the freaks that are jump off the page that maybe you didn't see in film. And then you're like, man, this kid, he's jumping a 43-inch vertical. He's going to be able to close the gap on a running back. Those types of things that are going to really help push a kid, up the draft board.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the 43-inch vert. I mean, that's Nick Emanwari from South Carolina, 6'3", 220-pound safety. It runs 4.38 with a hit.
Might be a linebacker.
Well,
220.
Shoot, let's go. Right. I mean, I think that's something to think about, and just the versatility of what your skill set, and now that you've shown you can do athletically, it certainly makes some sense. So he jumps 43 in the vert, which led the way, and then, has the broad jump of 11'6". I mean, it's just, but there's correlation there, right? So you see the guy at that frame run 4.38, you're kind of expecting those type of explosion numbers with the jumps.
Yeah, you are. I mean, so when an athlete is super explosive, they're going to get out of the blocks really fast.
Yeah.
But then, the 40 is an interesting thing because there's this, there's the first 10 and 20, and then there's the back end. If you looked at, I just used myself, since you rattled my numbers off, my 10 and 20 were pretty fast. My back half, the tight fullback hamstrings,
right.
But, if you look at, let's just use a track athlete like a Michael Johnson, his stride is so long. And his frequency is so fast that when he's hitting the ground, I mean, he's covering so much ground.
Yeah.
And so it's really impressive to see some of these offensive linemen run sub-5, moving that type of weight, having that big of gait. It's only going to serve them well. And most of those guys that are running, sub-5, they're going to be tackles, right? Because they can move, stay up with, a fast edge rusher.
Yeah, so you've got a guy like Armand Membu from Missouri, who was 6'4", 332 pounds. By the way, 82-inch wingspan, which you love to see. Those long arms there, and then ends up with a 4.91 40, 1.74 in the 10, verts 34, and broads 9.7, which is pretty dang good for a big guy like that, right? I mean, you're seeing a really athletic profile. I feel like these, when you guys get big guys in, right? Does body composition come into the equation? Because I know you only got 6 to 8 weeks, but how do you get the big guys to run so dang fast?
It does. You can a lot of times these athletes, when they come in, you just got to meet them where they're at first.
Sure.
What we're seeing that's been a trend over the last 20 years is we're seeing more and more of these athletes come in that have run the drills, and they actually have a base level of knowledge, which is. Back in the day when I was starting, guy had never run a 40-yard dash when we got him. So he didn't know how to get into a stance. So we're starting from just the basics.
Yeah.
Now you're getting these athletes that come in, they've been running it since they were 14 years old because we got NIL money at play. Right. You got all these colleges testing them. And so, it's really important for these athletes when they come in to go, okay, this is where my deficiencies are. And so, sometimes it is body comp.
Sure.
Hey, I haven't been able to watch my weight, watch what I've been eating because I've been in the season and I'm just trying to recover. And so we can really dial in that diet and get the body comp changed. So you're seeing that happen, every year these athletes are getting smarter and smarter, and it feels like it's starting to shift kind of naturally as well.
Yeah, I mean, like we get some guys who will drop some weight for the combine in hopes to run a little bit faster, maybe put that weight back on once they leave Indianapolis. So look, I think there is some context to be had there with what you play at, what the team's going to want you to play at, and how fast can you be at that weight. Certainly understand that part of it. You know, the other thing that's interesting to me is we're seeing less and less guys participate in the 20-yard shuttle, the short shuttle, and the L drill, that 3-cone. Do you feel like that is just kind of become like those are really technical and you got to spend more time kind of working those drills than maybe you would on others? So why do you think we're seeing less and less guys participate in those drills in particular?
It is technical. It is one of those things where you know your steps.
Yeah.
You know exactly where to place your foot. And if you don't get the proper time to train, it's really doesn't serve them well. So why go run a bad time when you can do that at your pro day? And, you know, we do this. You know, the combine, everybody looks at the combine because it's the first big event where we get to see these guys on the stage without their pads on. But the pro days are just as important at their colleges. And so we get a lot of guys that'll go, hey, if we're not going to run a great time, let's wait. Let's run it at your college. If you're ready, we're ready. Yeah. And so we can go train during that time as well. We've seen it time and time again where a guy will go and, you know, to the combine and you don't want to rush this because this is such a huge moment for them.
No doubt.
And these numbers, you just read my numbers off 20-something years later.
They
stick with you forever. They do. I mean, I was watching a podcast the other day and the guys were quoting their numbers, you know, and they've been in the league for 10, 15 years. You know exactly your number. And you'll know it the rest of your life. So you're like, man, just want to make sure we hit a great number and we're ready for it. And some of these, and it's a disadvantage for these guys that go in the playoffs late. Right.
That's right.
Because they don't get as much time training. And then if they go to an all-star game, you take out that time. And so you really have a really small time to train. And so we just want to make sure everybody's set up to win.
You know, there's another guy that I want to bring up as an example. He's young in his DB life. He was a converted wide receiver from Iowa State. His name's Darian Porter, and you know, put up some incredible numbers. Guy was big on special teams, blocked 5 kicks in his career, which, you know, has some value in and of itself. Probably still has some, you know, some rough edges to smooth out in terms of just playing, you know, full-time defensive back. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the numbers that he put up in those short shuttles and those 3 cones. So 4.04 in the short shuttle, which is pretty dang good, right? Really 6.71 in that 3 cone.
It's rolling.
What do those tell you about a player? Like what do those numbers in those drills tell you about a player?
You know, and once again, by position, but like you think about, okay, if I got to track a wide receiver, I'm a cornerback, I got to track a wide receiver. I have to be able to drop my hips, cut on a dime, and I got to be able to react. And that's what that drill teaches. Those L drills, what I love about it is you're cutting multiple ways. Yeah. You're having to change your whole body. You're literally having to turn your body all the way around a cone and get out as fast as you can. And so it translates really well in a small box area of being able to go, hey, how fast can you get around this cone? How quick can you get in and out of your brakes? How clean are you? Because the cleaner you are in it, the faster you run. Yeah. And so you're not chopping your feet. You're not overextending on the line. And so that drill really shows a lot. And so does the short shuttle. Sure. The short shuttle, you know, it depends on how you want to turn your hips. If you want to, you know, your first 5, a lot of ways we teach it now is to go sideways. It's a little quicker than turning your full shoulders. And so it's really about how the body type is be able to get around those corners and make it as fast as possible.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, for a guy, you know, that you want to see loose hips in a DB, you know, you're gonna showcase some of that in those drills. So I think those are really important for a player like that. That again, you're trying to paint a picture, right, with a team, and you're seeing this frame that's really attractive and like these athletic numbers that are attractive. I'm like, okay, maybe a little rough around the edges, but with those kind of numbers, maybe we can get there eventually.
Yeah, and right? I think, you know, look, the best coaches are at the NFL. I mean, for the most part, I mean, you think about it, they're able to develop these players, take these guys where they're at, and they're taking the raw ingredients, to your point. How do we – everybody's trying to find that, you know, diamond in the rough, you know what I mean? Sure. Like they're trying to find that needle in a haystack to go, hey, this person's got potential. I saw the numbers. We're going to get them and we're going to make them into that. I mean, we had a guy named Tim Tebow train with us back in the day, and he was, yeah. And like, we're like, man, they were like, hey, his throwing motion's wrong. But he went to the combine and he competed so well.
Yeah.
His numbers shot off the page. He went from, a fourth or fifth round draft pick to a first round draft pick because guys are like, oh my gosh, this guy is a dog. He is a worker. If he's willing to put this work in, we can turn him into something.
Yeah. And look, that might be the conversation with a player like Jalen Milroe this year out of Alabama, who's got that incredible
a great example. Great
You're
example.
Just trying to harness it. Right.
Yep,
and look, it's easier said than done, but that's why NFL coaches get paid the big bucks, man. That's what it's all about. Will, it's been a lot of fun, man. We sure do appreciate you giving us painting a better picture of what these numbers mean to these teams as they try to sort through all this data, because it is a mountain of data that you got to sift through to find what really matters to your teams. Will Bartholomew,
for having me.
CEO and founder, D1 Training. Great stuff, man. Do a great job over there. We appreciate you, buddy.